Medieval India, Chapter number 9, The Age of Vijayanagar and the Bahmanids and the Coming of Portuguese, 1350 to 1565. The Vijayanagar and the Bahmani kingdoms dominated India south of Vindhyas for more than 200 years. They not only built magnificent capitals and cities and beautified them with many splendid buildings and promoted arts and letters, but also provided for law and order and the development of commerce and handicrafts. Thus, while the forces of disintegration gradually triumphed in North India, South India, and the Deccan had a long spell of stable governments. This ended with the disintegration of the Bahmani Empire towards the end of the 15th century and of the Vijayanagar Empire more than 50 years later, after its defeat in the 1565 in the Battle of Bani Hatti. Meanwhile, Indian scene was transformed. First was the arrival of the Portuguese in the Western India and their attempt to dominate the Indian seas, and second with the advent of Mughals in North India. The coming of the Mughals paved the way for another spell of integration in North India and started a long era of confrontation between the land-based Asian powers and the European powers which dominated the seas. The Vijayanagar Empire, its foundation and conflict with the Bahmani kingdom. The Vijayanagar Empire was founded by Harihara and Bukka, who belonged to a family of 5 brothers. According to a legend, they had been the feudatories of the Kakatiyas of Warangal and became ministers in the kingdom of Kampili in modern Karnataka. When Kampili was overrun by Muhammad Tughlaq for giving refuge to Muslim rebel, the 2 brothers were imprisoned, converted to Islam and appointed to deal with rebellions there. The Muslim governor of Madurai had already declared himself independent, and the Hoysala, ruler of Mysore, and the ruler of Warangal were also trying to assert their independence. After a short, Harihara and Bukka forsook their new master and their new faith. At the instance of their guru, Vidyaranya, they were readmitted to Hinduism and established their capital at Vijayanagar. The date of Harihara's coronation is placed at 1336. At first, the young kingdom had to contended both with Hoysala ruler of Mysore and the Sultan of Madurai. The Sultan of Madurai was ambitious, and in battle he defeated the Hoysala ruler and executed him in a barbarous manner. The dissolution of the Hoysala kingdom enabled Harihara and Bukka to expand their tiny principality. By 1346, the whole of the Hoysala kingdom had passed into the hands of Vijayanagar rulers. In this struggle, Harihara and Bukka were aided by the brothers who, with their reasons, took up the administration of areas conquered by their efforts. The Vijayanagar kingdom was thus a kind of cooperative commonwealth at first. Bukka ascended his brother on the throne of Vijayanagar in 1356 and ruled till 1377. The rising power of the Vijayanagar Empire brought it to its clash with many powers both in the south and in the north. In the south, its main rivals were the Sultans of Madurai. The struggle between Vijayanagar and the Sultans of Madurai lasted for about 4 decades. By 1377, the Sultan of Madurai had been wiped out. The Vijayanagar Empire had then comprised the whole of South India up to Rameswaram, including the Tamil country as well as that of the Cheras, Kerala. To the north, however, Vijayanagar faced a powerful enemy in the shape of Bahmani kingdom. The Bahmani kingdom had come into existence in 1347. Its founder, Alauddin Hassan, had an Afghan adventurer. He had risen to the service of the Bahmana, named Gangu, and is therefore known as Hassan Gangu. After his coronation, he assumed the title of Alauddin Hassan Bahman Shah. He is said to have traced his descent from half mythical hero of Iran, Bahman Shah. But according to a popular legend mentioned by Farishta, the word Bahman Shah was meant to be a tribute to his Bahmana patron. In any case, in any case, it is from this rule that the kingdom was called the Bahmani kingdom. The interests of the Vijayanagar rulers and the Bahmani sultans clashed in three separate and distinct areas. The Tungabhadra Doab in the Krishna Godavari Delta and in the Marathwada country. The Tungabhadra Doab was the region between the rivers Krishna and Tungabhadra. On account of its wealth and economic resources, it had been the bone of contention between the Western Chalukyas and the Cholas in the earlier period, and between the Yadavas and the Hoysalas later on. The struggle for the mastery of the Krishna Godavari basin, which was very fertile and which was, with its numerous ports, controlled the foreign trade of the region, was often linked up with the struggle for the Tungabhadra Doab. In the Maratha country, the main contention was for the control of Konkan and the areas which gave access to it. The Konkan was a narrow strip of land between Western Ghats and the sea. It was extremely fertile and included within its port of Goa, which was an important outlet for the products of the region, as well as for the import of horses from Iran and Iraq. As has been noted earlier, good quality horses were not bred in India. The import of horses from Goa was thus of great importance to the southwest southern states. Military conflicts between the Vijayanagars and the Bahmani kingdom almost regular feature and lasted as long as the kingdom continued. These military conflicts resulted in widespread devastation of contested areas and the neighboring territories and the considerable loss of life and property. Both sides sacked and burnt towns and villages, imprisoned and sold into slavery men, women, and children, and committed various other barbarities. Thus, in 1367, when Bukka assaulted the fortress of Mudukal in the disputed Tungabhadra Doab, he slaughtered the entire garrison except one man. When this news reached the Bahmani Sultan, he was enraged and on the march vowed that he would not sheath his sword till he had slaughtered 100,000 Hindus in revenge. In spite of the rainy season and the opposition of the Vijayanagar forces, he crossed the Tungabhadra, the first time a Bahmani Sultan had in person entered the Vijayanagar territories. The Vijayanagar king was defeated in the battle and retreated into the jungle. We hear for the first time of the use of artillery by both sides during this battle. The victory of Bahmani Sultan was due to his superior artillery and more efficient cavalry. The war dragged on for several months, but the Bahmani Sultan could neither capture Raja nor his capital. In the meanwhile, the wholesale slaughter of men, women, and children went on. Finally, both the sides were exhausted and decided to conclude a treaty. This treaty restored the old position whereby the Doab was shared between the two. Even more important, it was agreed that since two kingdoms would remain neighbors for a long time, it was advisable to avoid cruelty in war. It is therefore stipulated that in future wars, helpless and unarmed inhabitants should not be slaughtered. Although this accord was violated sometimes, it helped make a warfare in South India more humane. Having strengthened its position in South India by eliminating the Sultanate of Madurai, the Vijayanagar Empire embarked upon the policy of expansion towards the eastern seacoast under Harihara II, 1337 to 1406. There were a series of Hindu principalities in the region, the most notable being the Reddis on the upper reaches of the delta and the rulers of Warangal in the lower reaches of Krishna Godavari delta. The rulers of the Odisha to the north as well as to the Bahmani sultans to the east were also interested in this area. Although the ruler of Warangal had helped Hasan Gangu in the struggle against Delhi, and his successor had invaded Warangal and seized the stronghold of Kaulas and the hill fort of Golconda, Vijayanagar had been too busy in the south to intervene. The Bahmani Sultan fixed Golconda as the boundary of this kingdom and promised that neither he nor his successors would encroach against Warangal any further. To seal this agreement, the ruler of Warangal had pre presented to the Bahmani Sultan a throne set with valuable jewels. It is said that it had been originally prepared as a present to Muhammad Tughlaq. This alliance of the Bahmani kingdom and the Warangal lasted for over 50 years and was a major factor in the inability of Vijayanagar to overrun the Tungabhadra Doab or to stem the Bahmani offensive in the area. These battles between the Vijayanagar and the Bahmanis are described in great detail by the medieval writers. However, they are not much historical importance to us, the position of the two sides remaining more or less the same, with the fortune of the war swinging sometimes to one side and sometimes to the other. Harihara II was able to maintain his position in the face of the Bahmani Warangal combine. His greatest success was in wresting Belgaum and Goa in the west from the Bahmani kingdom. He also sent an expedition to North Sri Lanka. Thank you everyone for tuning in. In the next part, we'll start from the next paragraph on page number 90. All the best for exams. Do share and subscribe the channel, and on the links you can find more videos that you can watch for the previous audiobooks. Thank you everyone for tuning in.